Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
If I look distracted, it's because this system just said something about a live stream, and I just had this like moment of panic that we're like mysteriously live streaming somewhere that I'm not aware of.
Right.
And so that's why I looked crazy. I had
We
crazy eyes when I said hi to you.
so we have to be more cautious than normal, which we never.
Perhaps. Who even
I
knows
don't
where
think
we're
we.
live streaming?
Yeah, and when do we ever say anything super controversial? Never. I mean,
Today could be the day.
right? That's right. That would be just our luck that
Yeah.
we offend everybody at once.
Okay, so I'm kind of excited for today's topic because it's helping me workshop a newsletter. This is all very like meta and weird. I'm
Yeah.
working today on a newsletter that's coming out tomorrow, which will be coming out 3 days before our podcast, which we're recording today, which is the day before it's coming out in real. Ugh. So we're gonna live workshop my newsletter,
And make
which
sure not to step on any butterflies because we could change the trajectory of humanity as we know it with that
exactly
whole timeline. We're
right,
messing with the timeline.
messing with the timeline.
Yeah.
Okay, so the topic is, and I'll tell you how I came up
Mm.
with this idea because it's kind of a crazy story. But the topic is like non negotiables for your influencer marketing agency. So if you are a brand hiring an influencer marketing agency, what are, it's like table stakes, what are the non negotiables? So that's the topic. The reason I came up with this is I had a call with a potential new client last week, and she told me the hands down craziest story about her current agency. So I always, if I'm meeting with a client who's already working with another agency, I mean, this is kind of like duh, obvious. Of course, you're going to ask it. Like, clearly you're not happy with them.
Right.
Tell me why.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to tell me who they are, but just like air for me all of your grievances
Hmm.
so I know how to be better when your
Right.
business.
Yeah. Smart.
This grievance like nearly knocked me off my chair.
Really?
Yeah. So she's working with an agency, and I mean, there were a number of things that were going down that were weird. So she wants to, her big thing is to have a certain number of influencers every month
Hmm.
post about her brand. So in my world, like, okay, you need this many influencers per month. Ideally, they're, between X and X followers, maybe a nice mix of tiers depending on what your needs are. This is what the cost will be. And like, for sure, you'll get at least this many influencers per month because that's what you're paying me for.
It's a known entity. It's a known quantity.
Okay, no, last month she got one because they spent all her money on strategy.
Without letting her know that, without saying, here's how much of the budget will go. I mean, strategy is
And
fine.
strategy for what? She didn't even get what she was paying for.
Right. Yeah. So strategy she didn't ask for,
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
Ooh, that hurts. Yeah.
And part of me, like, some of this feels like, and I'm a little bit torn because I have spoken before that I do feel like the current pricing model for influencer marketing agencies is a little bit wonky in that it's typically like, here's your flat fee for what you're going to get, and this percentage is agency fee, this percentage is paid, and this percentage is influencers.
Hmm.
And I've spoken before that I do think things would be a little bit easier if it followed more of the model of a PR agency where you just paid for influencers as they came through and all of the dollar amounts were fully transparent, and then there was just this hourly like retainer type rate. It just feels a little bit cleaner to me. That said, most brands don't want to do that, but also like that can't, like, it's kind of like half that. Even within that model, you still, like, if you're paying a PR agency in that way, where there's out of pocket costs and there's hourly fees, but you're supposed to be getting,
Right. There's a
a certain number
fixed.
of satellite media tours, or like there's certain deliverables, like you should still get the deliverables.
Well, I think that's where you lose me on the hourly retainer for an agency. And this is not the discussion that you probably want to focus too much on. But you have, and I have 12, 13, 15 plus years of experience doing this. That's a lot different than an agency who sucks up all your budget on strategy, doesn't tell you about it, gets you one influencer. Those are newbies, if you ask me. Those are people who don't know what's what, and they're working on vibes, as we've talked about. So to reduce it all to an hourly rate, you and I both know that if you're going to work for getting those extra, not extra, but you've contracted, you're going to get them 5, you're going to get them 5. And I think there will start to become problems if you or I or any agency were to come back and say, we've exhausted that hourly number, like the number of hours we said we would, and we didn't get there. So I think it's got to be value for money, not time for money.
Yeah, and I think even if you do, like, there have been situations in which we've sourced fewer influencers than promised to a client, but it's usually because we find someone who's amazing and they're twice the size, twice the money of what we had. Like, we were going to do 5 influencers at this, I'm just going to make up fake numbers, like 5 influencers at $1,000 each. And then we find someone who's $3,000, but is like absolutely the most perfect fit. And so, but we have a discussion and we say, we love her. She's amazing. Why don't we swap her in for 3 of the smaller ones and we just do fewer people, but you're going to make up for it in reach or video views or whatever it is.
And that's your expertise. That's your 10,000 hours at work for your client, which I do not think is captured in an hourly fee. Right. Like that's it's not just labor. That might actually take you less time as an agency, which it should, because you've built the relationships, you have the network, you can spot those diamonds, needles in the haystack, much more. So they're paying you for the value and expertise. But again, I think that's a little bit different conversation. And I also think your idea around paying influencers as they come in, I even said this at Nimbus to somebody. We got into the, what's the percentage, like, margin? What is your, should it be
your 20 agency fee? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this was an agency to agency discussion where we were sort of kicking around what the brands expect that number to be. And I think that's the real problem is, as agencies, if we're going to do what you say, there has to be some agreement that there is a management fee that has nothing to do with influencer compensation rates and whatnot. Like, that will be separate because we bring so much value.
Yeah. And I think that's where and I've kind of landed on the same side as you, that I don't know. I have said before that I thought the hourly rate thing was smart. I think that's one of these instances where I've kind of changed my mind on that for all the reasons you say. But one of the reasons I had kind of suggested that is I have heard from various brands who are all spending 7 figures a year on influencers what they think an hour or an agency fee should be. And I have
percentage wise,
and I have heard as low as 4% and as high as 50%. And so it's when there's that much discrepancy in just perception of what our value is, it feels very scary as a small independent business to put a stake in the ground and say, this is what the percentage should be.
Right. And that's why even in that conversation, which was behind closed doors and off record, I wouldn't ever say a percentage that I would put a stake in the ground, because let's face it. And now we've turned this podcast into a math problem. But if you have a brand that comes to you or me or any agency and says, we have $1 million to spend, and right off the bat, 4% is for the agency management, do the math with me, that's $40,000.
Well, and if you talk to anyone, like if you talk to any private equity firm or holding company, the expectation for any marketing agency, influencer or not, is that the profit margin is somewhere between 15 and 20%. So
you're already,
riddle me this, how do you have a profit margin of 15 to 20% when you're only taking 4?
Right. And at $1 million budget, you're already at a scale. Like, you could maybe say, if I have 4% and 10 clients. Like there is some math there at volume, maybe, but
Totally. Like I have that conversation with our CFO all the time. A lower percentage of a higher revenue is
it can
better
work.
than a higher percentage of zero.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right? And there's economies of scale when you work with a client for an extended period of time or on a large program. It actually does get easier to work, and you're expending a lower percentage of the
Right.
overall budget on your fee because you know them when you're
Yes,
using.
and if I still say, and again, this was part of like that diabolical exercise role play we did at Nimbus, where I gave the brand one goal and the agencies another goal. And the agency goal was activate the fewest number of influencers, because for an agency, for real, the lower the number of influencers you're dealing with, the less time, energy,
And that's
money.
exactly what I was going to say. And
Yeah.
any agency, okay, so getting back to the original,
Yeah.
what was supposed to be the topic of
Yeah.
this, a non-negotiable, I think, with your agency is that they should give brands a break when the work is like the agency fee should be commensurate with the amount of work required. So
Right.
so for example, if we're doing a program where it's 3 very large influencers versus a program where it's 100 very small influencers, the fee should be higher on the one with 100 very small ones.
Yes.
Because it's more people, it's more agreements, it's
Touch
more
points.
tracking, it's more follow-up, it's more QA, it's more usually when
Management.
it's 100 influencers, some of them are teeny tiny and have never done this before. So it's more hand-holding. It's
Yes.
more everything.
Yes.
So
Higher
that's
touch.
one. So, okay, non-negotiable number one is
Yep.
that agency fees should be sliding based
Right.
on the complexity of the project.
Right. And then it becomes that SAT question again of how does an agency, how are we being transparent about that? Is there a formula? Because when whether it's the 3 big influencers or the 100, we manage the crap out of those influencers. Like we are communicating, we are hand holding, we are hitting deadlines, we are herding squirrels from beginning to end, which is what we want to do because the brand doesn't want to do that. We do not take a 20% cut of their fee, of the influencer fee.
Okay, so that's another non-negotiable, no double dipping.
God, the double dipping. It is really interesting to see who's comfortable with it, who's talking about it out loud, like loud and proud.
I'm pulling out my notebook because I want to take notes on all these juicy non-negotiables that we're coming up with that I hadn't even, this is why I like doing this with you, because you help me think of things that I hadn't even thought of.
Well, you thought of it, but yeah, absolutely, the double dipping. So what Danielle is talking about is the agencies that want to both represent talent, possibly even exclusively. So their goal then, their mandate is to get those influencers work because they get paid that way. Everybody gets paid that way. But then they're also offering managed services. We will run the campaigns. We will develop, design, implement, track, and they get paid by the brand to do that. Guess what? Everybody loses, except maybe the agency in question, because they are double dipping from both pots of money.
Right.
And they're having to go ethically, like professionally. I don't know if it's legally, but they have to go to their talent first with this.
I've seen the double dipping, just to clarify though, I've seen the double dipping happen even with agencies who don't represent anyone exclusively.
That they're still taking a fee.
They're still
off the
taking
top.
a percentage even if
Got
it's
it.
not someone they represent.
Okay.
Like, in the case where they do represent them, I think that's a whole other discussion. You know, like, can you truly be doing what's very best for your client if you kind of have two masters, two mistresses? Like, you have to make money for the influencer and you have to do what's best for the brand, and those are kind of
at odds sometimes.
At odds with each other. Like, so that's that whole other question. But I've seen the double dipping happen even with large networks, large agencies that don't represent anyone exclusively. They're just taking money from everyone, from every which way.
In that instance, as a non-negotiable, are we saying the brands should be asking that very question? Where are you sourcing the influencers? And does your bottom line include taking a percentage of the influencer fees?
Yeah. I think they should say, like, what's your agency fee? I mean, I think you
structure.
can ask it a couple of different ways. Like, how do you make your money? I mean, that's a
Mhm.
little bit nosy. But
Right.
yeah, I think you have to ask about. I think it's worth a conversation. I don't think asking it is going to ensure that the response is honest,
Right.
just knowing some of the players in the space. But
Right. And that they don't do it.
I think it's worth a discussion, certainly.
Or it's worth, yes, and or it could be worth saying, we don't work with agencies that do XYZ or
Yeah.
something, putting their stake in the ground. And then further to that, probably it's even easier than to spot if an agency, talent management, whatever, says, oh, lucky you, we can manage the whole thing and we've got our own stable of influencers that we tap for these. That to me is not just a non-negotiable. I think that's a red flag.
Well, we say we have our own. So that's interesting because we do have a network. And I always say, which is great because it gives us a head start on recruiting.
Yes.
But then the brand's next question to us should, if they're really kicking the tires, then their next question to us should be, do you represent them exclusively? Are you taking a commission from them as well?
See, I think the next question should be, what if those people aren't the right fit? What do you do then?
Yeah. Well, they already asked that. I'm giving them a question. They were already asking me.
Gotcha.
Well, and the answer to what if they aren't the right fit is we'll find the right
Yeah.
fit and pull them in.
And you and I are probably savvy enough that we head that off right away.
Yeah.
This is how we source influencers, and we start here, then we go here, then we go here, then we roll up our sleeves and go manual if we have to. Okay. I guess what I'm saying as a non-starter is, to me, if it is pitched to the brand or anybody as we have these two business units, your network is not a business unit for you.
Right.
It's a resource.
That's a great point.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
So when it's clear that we're running these two business units and pitching it that they support one another.
Yeah,
There's
so
synergy.
you're saying that if you have managed talent and you have managed services, that's a red flag.
That's a red flag
or
for me.
at the very least, it's a dark yellow
and
flag.
Dig into that. What is the connective tissue there?
Right. Because I've had conversations with people who I trust and who explain that that there's kind of a firewall between the two and they keep them separate.
Yep. If there's separation of church and state and they can describe that and they're articulate about it, means they've thought it through. I mean, you went through this in your own agency life. When you tried it, you're like, this is a great idea.
We had talent who we represented exclusively. And at the end of the day, we decided that, you know what, it's more important for us to keep our clients happy. And we don't feel like we can keep both entities with our structure. We didn't feel like we could do the best work for both sides with that structure. And so it was a decision we made.
Yeah, I feel like I hear that story a lot, and that gives me faith in those folks who have, like, we tried it. Because back in the day, we're all trying a lot of things in the influencer, blogger, community building space. But then when you realize to have them too interconnected, there should not be like sort of an automatic pipeline between the two.
Right.
It should be our agents and managers handle that talent and our biz dev people handle brand deals. And maybe they throw something over the fence, like here's something to apply for, but it should not be an automatic bid or in.
And when they do get funneled in, getting back to our original thing, how is that money flow happening?
And transparency around that.
Right.
These are good. These are
complicated.
meaty.
What about, okay, help me on this one because I don't quite have the words formulated yet, but this is feeling like it's one. Like background of agency founders. So I feel like there are a number of agencies out there who came to this from like there's money there in them hills and I'm a tech bro and I got to get me some of that money. And so I'm going to build this thing versus where I'm struggling is this feels very like self-serving. Like, you know, it's a red flag if you don't have the same exact background that Casey and I do.
No, let's go with it. I like it. I want to back up and say sounds like somebody, Lauren at Nimbus, who said, this is a thought that wants to be a question. Yeah. So how do we get it into question form? Like what is the question there?
I'm personally skeptical of agencies who are doing this without like a deep expertise in the world of doing it. Like, I think it's helpful that my partners and I had our own blogs back in the day. I think it's helpful that I worked at Edelman and put together influencer programs for brands. So I saw what their stress points were. I saw what it was like to be trying to put this together at a big agency. And then from the blog side, I understood what went into creating that platform and
hours spent.
Right. Like
crafting.
there's a certain kind of expertise that comes from just being in the space. And so I'm naturally skeptical of people who come into this just from a pure, like, I'm thrilled to have people who have tech expertise and tech backgrounds doing this. It helps create platforms that are super helpful to us every day. But from a managed services perspective, I feel like there has to be some kind of deep background in those services.
And maybe you're moving toward, is there a litmus test then when you talk about non-negotiables? Because how do we prepare brands who are reaching out to agencies to vet carefully? And not the best salespeople are not necessarily the best experts at what they do. Like the sales team we see this with the platforms all the time, that people get sold into a platform. And then when they get onboarded, they're like, it's a wasteland in here because the business development is so smart and sharp, but the follow through isn't.
And I think I want to clarify, because I guess ultimately, if there's someone who wants to start up an agency and they don't necessarily have the background in it, but they appreciate what a special industry this is, and they bring on people who have a background and an expertise, I think I'm okay with that. I don't know that it has to be founder driven. Right. I think you need to know who your team is and why they're good at this. Like, I just think there needs to be some digging on the part of those who are hiring us and hiring our competitors, like, just to understand, like, how do you know what you're doing?
Yeah. And I'm still trying to get at, what would a brand ask to ascertain that? Because we've talked before about that there's gold and then there are hills has led to this proliferation of solutions that actually want to tap creators and make money off of creators in terms of subscriptions that creators would invest in, skimming off of creators' fees and that kind of thing. And we both agree that's a really tough business model and not where we would approach things, because we're trying to live, we're both influencer led. Like, that's our first goal, is honoring and celebrating what they're doing and getting them the resources and the money and the recognition, because we know brands and their partners will benefit from it so much. So maybe it's a question of the brand kicking the tires of the agency to say, like, what's your mission, vision, values around this? And if it's make money or provide, like, honestly, you and I both get pitched all the time, probably in your DMs and LinkedIn, of like, hey, I've got this new platform and solution. Can I show it to you for 15 minutes? And after talking with you multiple times in this podcast about it, the minute somebody says, this is designed to help creators or to code for fleece creators or take money from them, I'm like, I'm out. I already know it's not it doesn't have legs. Like, there's just not a there.
I don't know that there's a magic question, but I think it's just some digging. Like, yes, ask what the mission of the company is, ask what your background is, why you started, why the company was started, how long it's been around.
Right.
And I think it's just a kind of like almost.
Yes. But probably a series of dates. Okay, I'll give you one more insight that I'm going to tell on one of the sponsors that came to Nimbus. So the agency is a design agency, and that's their home base. That's their expertise. And it can be visual identities for brands, branding. It can be collateral for trade shows. It can be anything in between, but design. One of the pillars of their work that sprang out of that is working with brands who want to do elevated gifting for influencers. So they're into the influencer world was through design. let's just say. I mean, not let's just say, but that's how it was. So they're not deeply educated or immersed in the influencer world. So somebody from that agency, the owner founder, came to Nimbus, and he was like, he said to me,
he was a sponge. I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
He was just
a sponge. And he said, I almost had to step out day one because it was so intense, so much. Like, that's where we were at Nimbus, is we were in the muck. Like, we were all talking. And one of our facilitators said the same thing. He came from Bowling Green State University, and he wanted to bring something back to his students. And he's like, even my smartest, most capable social media superstar in my student faculty or student staff, if I dropped her into that, she would have been lost. So I think this is another way to vet agency folks is, what is their vernacular? What is their language? What is their comfort level with some of these, which requires the brand to kind of know what's up. And that's not fair to the brands because they're reaching out to the agencies to get support around this. But maybe we make a cheat sheet, ask them these 3 questions. And if their eyes glaze over, they're not the right one for you.
right.
If they dig in and they're like, oh, let me tell you how we handle that. Maybe then you've got your
I guess we're not going to cover all of them today, but I guess one of the things that bums me out about this, and maybe you tend to make me feel better when I share my
no pressure,
the bummers in my life,
your angst.
It kind of gives the industry a bad name. Getting back to that conversation I had with the client last week, it was clear that she kind of thought that's just how it goes. I really want to get 10 influencers a month. Dang, I got one.
Oh, right. And you're like, it's so
she knew
doable.
She knew that wasn't right, and so and she's looking for someone else. But she was asking some questions that it became kind of clear that she felt like this was something she had to protect herself against in the future. And that's where I'm coming at this. No, you shouldn't have to protect. That should just be a given. You say you want 10 influencers a month, you get 10 influencers a month.
Yes, and the agency starts there and fits strategy in where the budget allows.
And you know what? And one of the things I said to her is that sounds like a them problem, not a you problem. If it's costing, sometimes we price stuff and, we're talking about with sliding agency fees, sometimes something seems like it's going to be easier. And so you do a lower fee. And then it turns out that the client is more complicated. The influencers are more difficult. Something happens. Things go wrong. You end up being way less profitable than you thought.
Mm-hmm.
Sucks for me. And next time I'll price it differently.
Yes, but you take the hit as the agency.
Yeah. As a client service company, I take the hit and I learn a lesson and I change my process to reflect it and I move onward and upward. And
that could be a non-negotiable right there is don't set, make sure as a brand to set clear deliverables, the 10 a month, and don't accept less than that. Don't let them say, oops. Go back to them and say, this is a you problem. How do you plan to solve it for me? I think that is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And at the very least, it could be okay, we missed the mark this month. Let us make it up to you next month. We're now going to double down. There should be some solution problem solving going on there.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think the state of our industry from the agency side is we have been commoditized. And if we're commoditized, that means we're all competing on price and perceived value, which might be number of influencers somebody attracts. And so I don't think I'm putting your angst at ease by saying that. But if we know that, then I think we need to search independently as agencies for what our sweet spot is and what we offer a value that's below the waterline.
Yeah.
And not just
and
the tip of the
I would
iceberg.
just encourage brands, if something feels hinky,
right.
push back and
we
should feel comfortable. You should feel happy with what you're getting.
Yeah. We're too far into the industry. We're too knowledgeable for that to be acceptable or to blemish the industry's reputation. I agree. There's no reason that you can't have success. And the right agencies will manage your expectations. If she wanted 10 influencers that were all 10 million followers, she's low budget, the variables might have been crazy, but then the agency just needs to be her partner in that and guide her and not surprise and frustrate her at the end.
Yeah. I think I'm going to slip in one more. We'll go a little
Yeah.
bit over if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I think agencies need to be honest about what they can do and can't do themselves. Like just so again, to give an example, we worked with a client last year and it was a home improvement. It was like a roofing product. And they had been told, no, you can't do influencer marketing for roofing. That's not a thing. And so that was like they actually came to us and they're like, well, we can't do this. We were told we can't do this. And what I wish agencies, and not every agency could do it, like it was a tricky program. There's stuff we can't do. Like when people come to, like I always say, if you want like super high luxury fashion, we're probably not your agency. That's very specialized. It's very different than most of what we do.
Right.
Like I can share with you some other folks who would do a great job with that. Like I just think brands deserve to have agencies be, instead of saying like, no, you can't do that at all.
Mm-hmm. Because we
How
can't
about
do
just
that?
say we're not your partner for that?
Right.
That is probably possible, but not with us.
Yeah. I think that's a whole new idea for a podcast is agency best practices. That's what you're talking about. Agency process, agency. You and I, as founder-led agencies, have had to balance both our knowledge of the industry and our expertise there, as well as our operations, operational excellence, growth, team, all of that. And I believe what you're talking about is the bridge between those two and understanding how to say our process is, our sweet spot is not the money grab. We'll just take anything.
Right.
And then we'll be the dream killers about that. Because that agency so easily could have said their brand went to them, their client went to them because they're the expert they trust.
Right.
So that agency had the total option to say, we can't do that, but let us help you. Let us vet. Let us make this easy for you and support you instead of just. So, but that's even different, I think, than the non-negotiables piece. That's like thought leadership and operational excellence. And, we're up against it, Danielle.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe
we'll
that makes you feel
that.
better. Maybe it doesn't.
You were going, I feel better. I always feel better after talking to you. You are going on vacation, so we will be back in 2 weeks. And maybe we can tackle, I'm sure some other drama will pop up, but if not, we will tackle agency best practices.
Ooh, I'd love it.
Okay.
I'd love it. All right. Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.